I'm not just MAGA. I'm Dark Gothic MAGA.
All right, everybody, let's talk about Dark MAGA, what it is and what it symbolizes, because we know that the tech industry poured more money into the last US election than any other sector. At first glance, it might seem predictable, right? Corporations routinely spend on campaigns to lobby for tax breaks, deregulation, or the removal of obstacles like trade commissioners. But beneath these surface level goals lies a far more unsettling agenda, and this is what demands attention from us. Hear me out. Silicon Valley's power brokers are not just seeking favorable policies here. They're actively working to dismantle government infrastructure in order to carve out autonomous zones, which are basically safe havens where they can operate beyond democratic oversight and even establish their own privatized governance. And this is not a conspiracy theory, even though it sounds like it. It's a clear vision that they have openly championed for years at different elite tech conferences and in their private circles. And their rhetoric reveals a very disturbing belief in their own intellectual superiority and a desire to reshape society into a technocratic oligarchy with themselves as its unchallenged rulers. In short, this isn't merely about profit. It's about power and the audacity to redefine who holds it.
Silicon Valley is insane.
Right.
It's not so much a support thing, it's more like a takeover thing, trying to put themselves in a position to have as much control as possible. They want Trump to be the CEO of the United States of America, and they want to be the board of directors that makes him listen to them.
Let's turn to Balaji Srinivasan, who's a central figure in Silicon Valley's most powerful circles. He's a former partner of venture capitalist Ben Horowitz. He's an ex-CTO of Coinbase, who was under CEO Brian Armstrong, and he was even floated around by Peter Thiel to lead the FDA during Trump's first term. And Balaji is deeply enmeshed with these tech elites. His influence, however, extends far beyond resume credentials. In his book, The Network State, Balaji outlines a radical vision, dismantling existing nation-states into fragmented territories operating as corporate entities. Think of it as startup governance, right? Microstates with privatized rule, shielded by military-grade security, and unaccountable to democratic norms. While he frames this as the path to freedom, the undertones are much, much darker. Now, notably, Balaji didn't originate this dystopian blueprint. He just repackaged ideas from Curtis Yarvin, who's a very controversial tech-aligned philosopher and software developer who's been funded by Peter Thiel. Now, Yarvin's manifesto is pretty blunt. He says, tear down crappy historical governments and replace them with a global patchwork of corporate dictatorships. Each microstate would function as a joint stock corporation governed without citizen consent, using pervasive surveillance, biometric ideas, and other draconian compliance measures. Yarvin's rhetoric escalates to some pretty grotesque extremes. He's argued that poor people are just liabilities, jokingly suggesting converting them into biodiesel, later saying that it was just a joke, while proposing virtual prisons as a humane alternative to achieve the same end as genocide: mass control without the moral stigma. Now, obviously, these ideas weren't super popular with the masses, so what Balaji did was sanitize the same ideas. He rebranded Yarvin's authoritarianism as tech libertarian innovation. But the core still remains the same, right? A world where unregulated tech oligarchs carve out estates, displacing democracy with profit-driven autocracy. And you might ask yourself, what makes this more than just fringe theorizing? Well, the billions that have been funneled into these visions by Silicon Valley's elite. And when money and influence align with such ideologies, the threat shifts from abstract into alarmingly tangible. And right now, these tech elites aren't just theorizing. They're actively constructing cloud communities, which are digital-first networks that act as sovereign virtual nations. And these online platforms serve as a blueprint. Once established, the goal is to expand into the physical world by acquiring land and incentivizing their followers through ideology and financial perks and promises of utopian living to migrate en masse to these privatized zones, like Praxis. For those of you who don't know, Praxis is a tech-funded project aimed at building a prototype for a startup city, a small experimental territory governed by private tech leaders rather than traditional democratic governments. Think of it as a test run for creating a corporate-controlled mini-nation. Now here, listen to Balaji talk about something he calls tech Zionism.
Really calling for something like tech Zionism, a movement supported by a global network to take back territory in the city, floor by floor, street by street, block by block, policeman by policeman. You have a foothold of private property, and you have a group membership of Grey Tribe membership and private property. You also issue t-shirts. The tribal lens is like a virtual reality filter. Every single thing can be tagged as gray or blue in the city. I mean, literally. So gray is the future, red is the past, blue is the present. So blue stands against both the past and the future. They're against both the self-driving cars, and they don't want to go back to the 50s. They prefer OnlyFans, Me Too, BLM, Ukraine. The hard part is to take control of the streets. How can you fence off a street and make clear that it's under great control? Take total control of your neighborhood, push out all blues, tell them they're as unwelcome as just as blues ethnically cleanse me out of San Francisco. Like, push out all blues, who has lost some territory in the cloud. They still control the land. Once Gray starts taking back control of the land, that they're really going to howl. As they start losing, they're going to whistle for backup from California and eventually DC. Okay? They're going to try to get executive orders or things like that, which means you're going to need to have sympathizers at the level of California and DC who will side with you enough to block those actions, number one, and or number two, you actually get to the level of a sanctuary city. You say, I dare you.
What's super alarming is that this ideology isn't just confined to Silicon Valley. During his 2024 campaign, the Orange Cheeto Man unveiled a policy proposal for Freedom Cities, new federally backed urban developments on virtual land framed as hubs for American innovation. While marketed as a patriotic revival of industry, the parallels to the tech-backed projects like Praxis are kind of striking, because both envision privatized, semi-autonomous zones exempt from traditional governance.
1/3 of the land mass of the United States is owned by the federal government, with just a very, very small portion of that land, just a fraction, 1/2 of 1%. Would you believe that? We should hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities and award them to the best proposals for development. These freedom cities will reopen the frontier, reignite American imagination.
This isn't just coincidence, guys. It's collaboration. Because the same billionaires that are bankrolling tech's network states have long influenced political agendas. When populist rhetoric and techno-utopianism merge, the result is a bipartisan assault on the very idea of government by the people. Enter J.D. Vance, who's a seemingly odd pick for Orange Cheeto Man's VP, given that his predecessor, Mike Pence, had no ties to Silicon Valley. But Vance's rise is no accident, because tech billionaire Peter Thiel funneled a record-breaking $15 million into Vance's Senate campaign, which was the largest single donation in U.S. Senate history. So this isn't just about financial backing, it's ideological adoption. Vance operates as a political proxy for Thiel's vision. And to grasp his agenda, you must first understand Peter Thiel, who's a Silicon Valley titan who openly advocates for dismantling democracy in favor of corporate-run governance. Vance's rhetoric, which is anti-establishment, pro-tech sovereignty, and hostile to traditional institutions, mirrors Thiel's playbook. Cheeto Man's pivot from a guy like Pence to a guy like Vance signals a very strategic alliance with Silicon Valley. Because it's not just a VP choice, it's a bridge between MAGA populism and Silicon Valley's ambition to rewrite the rules of society. And to grasp the stakes here, you need to dig into Peter Thiel's 2009 manifesto called The Education of a Libertarian, which is a very chilling blueprint for his worldview. Now, while I urge you to read it yourself, here's the crux. Thiel outright rejects democracy, arguing that ordinary people cannot be trusted with major decisions. He declares that democracy and freedom are fundamentally incompatible, and he insists that true progress requires liberating great men, like himself, from the constraints of laws and public accountability. His solution? Create autonomous zones where these self-anointed visionaries can rule with near unrestricted authority, free from democratic checks. And this isn't theoretical, it's the ideological bedrock fueling Thiel's investments in political puppets like Vance and tech-driven projects like Praxis. When he bankrolls politicians or funds startup cities, he's actually executing his vision, replacing governance by the people with governance by the powerful. Why does this matter, you ask? Well, because Thiel isn't just a billionaire, he's a kingmaker. His ideas are actively shaping policy, tech, and the future of who holds power. And ignoring his manifesto means ignoring the playbook.
Represents isn't crazy, and it's not going away. He points toward a new Republican Party. He points even beyond the remaking of one party to a new American politics.
I'll dive deeper into these connections in an upcoming part 2, but for now, I urge you to sit down with what we've covered. This isn't hypothetical, it's a roadmap being actively funded and pursued. Do your own research, follow the money, and read Thiel's writings, and connect the dots between Silicon Valley's rhetoric and their political alliances. And yes, I know it sounds dystopian, because it is, but turning away out of fear only empowers those orchestrating this shift. And awareness is the first step to resistance, so please, stay skeptical, stay curious, and remember, the future that they're selling as innovation is anything but free.